Welcome to the Grace Period, where we get real about attorney mental health and well-being and pull back the veil on the high-stakes world of big law. I'm your host, Emily Logan Stedman. In this demanding profession, it is crucial that we don't lose ourselves in the hustle for billable hours. On the Grace Period, we have honest conversations about finding consistency, minimizing chaos, developing coping strategies, and destigmatizing mental health. It is time to prioritize our shared humanity, to find our grace period. So far this season on the Grace Period, we've defined big law, defined the billable hour, discussed how to track the billable hour, reviewed opening and closing rituals, explained what a master case chart is, chatted about time blocking, and defined what it actually means to take ownership of your matters. Today, we'll talk about the thing I felt most awkward about as a junior associate: stalking partners. As a junior associate in a big law firm, one of the trickier aspects of the job is knowing how to properly manage up to the partners you work with, or even senior associates. We're all busy, and as a side note, I hate that word. Attorneys use it too much. Everyone is busy, and the word can be used as a crutch or a cop-out, an excuse for ghosting, ignoring, and more. That said, partners and senior associates are extremely busy individuals, juggling a million balls in the air at any given time. As you grow in this profession, the number of things that vie for your time will also grow exponentially year over year over year, both professionally and personally. That is why learning to manage your own time is so critical. That is also why it is important to learn to manage partner expectations, as well as partner deadlines and communication. So, let's say a partner asked you to do a task by an internal deadline, explaining that this is a deadline that gives her time to review the item before turning it to the client by another deadline, and before sending it to the opposing party by a third and final deadline. When you're awaiting input or approval from a partner on a key filing, draft, or other deliverable with a hard deadline looming, how do you ensure that you get the attention needed, you get the review ahead of those deadlines without stepping out of line? The simple answer is you nudge them. Today, we're going to cover the right ways for associates to respectfully and effectively nudge partners to keep critical work streams and deadlines on track. Let's start with why nudging partners is so important in the first place. At big firms, there's an implicit understanding that associates need to proactively manage deadlines, to follow up, to keep matters moving forward, to take ownership, like we discussed in episode 7. It is expected that associates will track every ongoing project and its associated timeline. Your assigning or supervising attorneys depend on you, the associate, to be the ones raising flags, giving them reminders when action is needed. Not doing this means that work can grind to a halt. It can create bottlenecks that reverberate across the team and across the matter. Essentially, not following up shows a lack of ownership. It can be viewed as a lack of commitment. It signals you're just waiting to be told what to do rather than taking a proactive approach. With that responsibility in mind, nailing your timing and approach of nudging partners and senior associates is critical. You don't want to be a nagging pest. You don't want to be butting in at every turn, but you also can't go dark until a deadline is right there on your doorstep. I think the best practice is to start nudging with plenty of time in advance, maybe 5 to 7 days out from a due date. And be sure to always mention the specific target date and give context on what portion of the process currently rests on the partner's input. Tone is also important. You should use a respectful and deferential tone. Again, you want to be respectful and deferential while also being clear that you need their eyes on X draft or Y filing by Z date to keep things moving forward per the committed to timeline. Related to this is using subject lines of your emails strategically. When an email includes or references a due date, I'll include that due date as the first words of the email subject line. Due June 12th. matter name, description of what is due. You can also say like action required in all caps or approval needed, and update the subject line with every communication so that if it comes to it, you ultimately can write due tomorrow or due today as appropriate. In fact, if you're initially given a deadline by a partner, it is perfectly okay to clarify expectations around nudging and timeline right out the gate. So for example, per our discussion, I have the draft opposition brief targeted for filing around June 15th. I will have a draft to you by June 8th. Please let me know if that timing still works for you or if you need to adjust that target date for the draft. You can even back it out another week. The filing's due April 15th. I recommend we get it to the client by April 8th, which means I'll have a draft to you by April 1st. By communicating this up front, you give your assigning attorney an easy out to reset the schedule if needed, rather than having them miss an assumed deadline that they don't even recall they committed to. I also recommend putting those internal, external, and firm and final deadlines on your calendar. You should include everyone relevant to the drafting or action item in those calendar invites, and of course you can adjust them as the schedule adjusts. Of course, initial nudges don't always garner responses. You get a draft to the partner on June 1 because they want to get it to the client by June 8th, and you don't hear anything. Partners, attorneys, humans, all of us have radars that can be pulled in countless other directions at any given moment. That's where and why you need to be persistent while remaining polite and deferential. So if I turn something in on a Monday that's due to the client the following Monday, about halfway through that or in 2 to 3 business days, I might nudge the partner for the first time. It might have a little more urgency to it. Something like, "Hi partner, I'm circling back on my email from earlier this week. We discussed getting this draft to the client on Monday, June 8th. I'll need your review and input on the draft by the end of day Friday so I can incorporate the revisions before sending it to the client for our Monday deadline." Again, you're still giving advance notice, but in more absolute terms. You're making it clear that the ball is in the reviewing attorney's court to keep the process moving forward as planned. I'll pause here to say this. Being polite and deferential does not mean being overly soft or apologetic. You are doing your job. So review all of your emails for softening language. Words like just, as in, "I'm just following up." Cut that out. And only apologize if you've really done something wrong or really made a mistake. If an apology isn't truly necessary, don't say it. If you're doing your job, you don't need to be sorry or apologize for that. In instances where you've sent multiple reminders without any substantive response from the partner as a major or final and firm deadline looms, you may need to escalate, but you have to be cautious in how you go about this. The cardinal rule is obvious. Do not blindside or go over a partner's head without making repeated attempts to get their attention first. Have a clear document trail showing your persistent follow-ups over a reasonable period of time. If it comes to it, one option that I use, I call negative notice. It looks something like this. If I don't hear from you by this date and time, then I am going to do this specific action. And then you do it. You follow through. Now, not all partners like this, so you'll need to feel folks out. But this can often trigger a response, or at minimum, it's a CYA for when you take that action. You've created a paper trail showing your communication and planned action items. The important part here is that you've set a clear and reasonable time frame for final input on a take it or leave it basis, with the understanding that ultimately, the show must go on if they're unable to engage by that point. Then, as an absolute last resort, you can send the draft to the client, to the other party, with a note that says something like, "Please see attached for your review, but note, this remains subject to this partner's or this client's review. I'm sending it now to ensure we stay ahead of the deadline. I'll recirculate once that partner or client has signed off." I have a pause there because I can feel myself getting a little bit stressed recalling the first few times I had to do this. It can be very much out of someone's comfort zone to take this next step and to keep things going when the assigning or reviewing attorney has gone MIA. Again, I would encourage you to think about it as, what's your job here? What's your role? And how can you keep things going forward in a way that shows ownership of the file and shows you're being proactive? You can always talk to another associate or partner or mentor about how to handle these situations if they're happening to you a lot or you really, really are having trouble getting someone's attention. And notice in all these examples, I'm taking the utmost care to not make it seem like I'm calling anyone out. It's framed as making sure the deadline isn't missed, and it continues to give the partner or reviewing attorney a chance to chime in. You may end up working with attorneys who seem to frequently miss deadlines or drop the ball repeatedly in a certain area. These people do exist. It really shocked me as I grew in the profession. But we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and some people are not good, what I call, or what Gallup Strengths calls, executors. They need someone else to help them along to make sure they're meeting deadlines. And you can be that person. But if you're working with someone that this happens a lot, take a step back, ask for a conversation, and talk about a more holistic approach to workflow and process improvements that could help you get the support you need and make sure you're giving them what they need and expect. Again, the goal is not accusatory finger pointing. It's to have a dialogue so you can understand what the partner expects in terms of being proactive and confirming deadlines and what type of notice they need or want to help them remember or engage as deadlines approach. Open communication and transparency are crucial. And if you simply demand that the reviewing or assigning attorney do better without recognizing that there are other things probably going on, the dynamic is not going to improve. It's not going to be workable for anybody. And don't forget, you can always make a phone call or stop in the person's office. Leaving a note and a voicemail can be a quick way to get a call or email back. And really, ultimately, as an associate, there's no such thing as over-communicating. Back in the day, I mean before COVID, I had stories told to me of associates walking into a partner's office and calling the partner on their cell phone from their office line. So it looked like they were calling themselves in order to, get the partner to pick up the phone and communicate. I think those days have changed a little bit post-COVID, but there's lots of creative ways to try to get someone's attention while also maintaining respect and professionalism. So, nudging partners is about doing your job, keeping things moving, and being aware of when those nudges could be more effective and making timing adjustments, setting clearer expectations up front, or having broader check-ins to get on the same page with your reviewing attorneys and teammates. The right degree of polite persistence plus emotional intelligence for the assigning or reviewing attorney situation can keep your work streams flowing while also developing respect and avoiding surprises. And these are skills that law firms and partners value immensely. If you're listening and you have tips for nudging or stalking partners, I'd love to hear them. You can share on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I would love to hear from some of you. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Grace Period. I hope this discussion has provided some insights about managing up, nudging, or stalking partners. Next week, we'll talk about being out of the office and taking vacation. Remember, you don't have to sacrifice your well-being for career success. By prioritizing self-care, setting boundaries, and seeking support, you can survive and even thrive in the law. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. That is the path to our grace period. Disclaimer. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute professional advice of any kind, including legal advice. No attorney-client relationship is created by listening to this podcast.